Hello everybody. Thought I'd make a video tonight. It's the weekend. It's Friday, and so it's the weekend after or since the Breonna Taylor verdict or decision, the grand jury decision in that case. I'm gonna have my coffee tonight and probably have a cigarette here in a minute. So, not a plug to McDonald's, but they do have good coffee. So. If you're a subscriber to this channel, or if you've seen any of the videos that I have, then you may or may not know that I live in Louisville, Kentucky. You probably know me, honestly, because I've only got 5 subscribers at this point. Hopefully I want to grow that and get more people. But the people that know me live here, certainly, so they know what's been going on. Anyone else that would watch any of these videos, I'll try to talk to you about that tonight. I'm going to make this video about race relations, about some feelings that I have, about some interactions that I've had, and about kind of more of a criminal justice, because that's what it comes down to, is that a lot of the race issues relate to criminal justice system. So, and I can talk about that certainly, unfortunately. I'm not an attorney. I've never claimed to be an attorney. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm going off of my experience and also what I can read from the statutes and the cases that are, public knowledge, anyone can read. So, I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and it's for, I'm 37 years old, so I've lived here most of my life, been some other places and lived some other places, but for the most part, lived here. Louisville has a very checkered past with race relations and with dealing with people of color, of any color, and also a lot of other things as it relates to race. So, and to say that, during the Civil War, Kentucky was a neutral state, but there was a lot of serious, significant battles fought here in Kentucky, and that's the Civil War. Kentucky was one of the first states to join the Union, basically. In 1792 is when Kentucky joined the Union as a state. So, not very long after the Revolutionary War happened, Kentucky was a part of Virginia. Virginia is definitely and decidedly a southern state. So Kentucky shares a lot of that history and a lot of that lineage with Virginia. They've made their own, obviously, because they're a separate state. But going forward in the Civil War, Kentucky was a neutral state. But people in Kentucky owned slaves, and there was a lot of battles that were fought here, namely Perryville. I've been to the recreation, the reenactment rather, of that battle when I was in high school. It was a very interesting experience. If you haven't seen a Civil War battle or a Revolutionary War battle where you live at, go see one. It's something that you can actually see the history, you can smell the history, the gunpowder, and all those things. The Civil War was a very divisive time in our country. I wasn't alive then because I'm 37 years old. I wasn't alive during the Civil War, and no one watching this was alive during the Civil War. But the Civil War was a very divisive time, and a lot of people fought against their own family, or they were, things got really bad. And I feel like that's almost the state that we're in now, in this country and certainly in this area. So, Kentucky was Jefferson County, where I live at in Louisville. Jefferson County is the county where I live in, and Louisville is the seat of that county. So, biggest city in the state, majority of the population of the whole state is here in this city or in this area, this metro area. So, yeah. So, Louisville has a very decorated history, if you call it that, of race relations not being the greatest. Let's be honest. And I can say that because I live here and I'm from here. Louisville was one of the last school systems to desegregate after the Civil Rights Act was passed and after all the things that happened in the 60s. Louisville finally did it in the 70s, in the early 70s. So Louisville has a history over time of not playing by the rules and of not getting with things. And that's, I think a lot of that has to do with Kentucky. Kentucky is a state, there's an old adage that says that if the world ends, they'll find out about it in Kentucky 20 years later. So, you know, in a lot of different things in my life, I can say that Kentucky is behind the times. We have a horse track, but it's sketchy on them offering any kind of expanded gaming because they don't want to challenge the horse track and the other industries that relate to that. So that's the reason why we don't have like casinos on the but you can go to Indiana and you can go over there and gamble your money in Indiana and then come back over here. So I don't know. Kentucky's in a lot of sense, it's a very conservative state and it's a very unprogressive state. So that trickles through to other cities, to other ideas and other issues. The big issue, I guess, right now is, Minneapolis has George Floyd, whereas Louisville has Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor wasn't killed in police custody, but she was killed as a result of a search warrant that happened. There's countless videos by a lot of people, and I've seen videos that are from people that are either neutral, but more often than not, they're biased one way or the other. You can look those videos up and see. I'm not going to go through the facts or evidence or anything like that of the case, but suffice to say, they had a reason to be there. The police officers that were there had a warrant. They had a reason to be there. Breonna Taylor was named in that warrant, and that's really uncontroverted. You can't dispute that intelligently. So they had a reason to be there. They had a warrant. The Attorney General in Kentucky, Daniel Cameron, who's a Republican, he used to work for Mitch McConnell. I've had the pleasure of meeting him, Daniel Cameron. He took over as special prosecutor, and then a grand jury was convened. The grand jury results were that one of the officers, a detective, would be charged with 3 counts of what Kentucky calls wanton endangerment. A lot of states call it different things. When it comes down to it, his actions and the reason he's charged and indicted, and he's been arrested, booked into jail, and released because he bonded out, something that people have a right to have. He fired his weapon into apartments that were adjacent to Breonna Taylor's apartment when they served this warrant. He's charged with that. He's not charged with killing Breonna Taylor. The Attorney General in his press conference said there's not really much evidence, any evidence, that says that the officer that's charged shot Breonna Taylor. His reasoning for him being charged and for presenting that charge of wanton endangerment to the grand jury was that Detective Hankinson firing his weapon into an adjacent apartment or apartments constituted careless disregard for the value of human life. And so for that, he should be charged with 3 different felonies, 3 counts of the same felony, which he has been charged with. The other 2 officers, a sergeant who was shot in the leg and shot in the femoral artery and nearly died, and another officer, they were not charged for anything related to anything else, and no one was charged. None of the 3 officers that made the warrant, made the raid, were charged with anything related to her death. The Attorney General and the grand jury found that the evidence supported that the shooting was justified and the use of force, deadly force, was authorized because they were fired on first. So that begets the problem. There was before that decision was announced, a civil lawsuit was filed. I believe it was in March or April of this year. Civil lawsuit was filed. The civil lawsuit was settled by the mayor, and there's some sketchiness about that decision and that settlement that the mayor gave the family. They gave the city settled for $12 million with the Taylor family. That's $4 million more than they've previously settled in similar types of cases. And so that settlement was decided before the Attorney General verdict or the announcement of the grand jury decision on Wednesday. That civil case was settled before that. So the news has publicly reported that part of the terms of that civil settlement, besides $12 million to the family and a list of police reforms, which make common sense on the face of it, is that, turn this light on here. Besides that money and those police reforms, it's also stated that any evidence that the attorneys got is to be destroyed. So any case files, any evidence, Any materials that the attorneys in a civil lawsuit got, it has to be destroyed. And that begs the question, but no one's seeming to answer that. Doesn't make much sense that you would want evidence destroyed if you're the family and you would agree to that stipulation. There was also some other stuff that was filed before that where gag orders were put in place. Things were made secret and sealed. Doesn't make much sense. So you have a lot of hypocrisy with this situation. You have, on one hand, you have family asking for answers. On the other hand, you have the same family keeping evidence from the public and I'm not sure because I'm not familiar with the details of the settlement, but I'm believing that it's probably something like a confidentiality agreement where in order to get the police reforms and the money, they have to be quiet about the things that may or may not have been shown to them and to their attorneys that were probably shown to them, honestly. So it doesn't make much sense. The shooting happened in March, in the middle of March, the 13th of March, I believe. The detective that secured the affidavit for the warrant is under investigation by an internal investigation, not a criminal investigation as of yet, but an internal investigation for the very broad and vague arguments that he used and statements he made in that allegation in the warrant to get the warrant, the search warrant. That's what it was. It was a search warrant. It wasn't an arrest warrant. It wasn't a going to someone's house and kill them warrant. It wasn't anything other than a search warrant. And it was specifically a narcotics search warrant. But the problem is, and you can read the Fourth Amendment and read what the Fourth Amendment says, but more or less the Fourth Amendment says that you have the right to unreasonable searches and seizures by the government, and unless they have a warrant, and if they get a warrant, it has to name specifically what they're looking for. You can find the warrant freely on the internet. It's out there. I have a paper copy of it because I've read it. I've also looked at several videos that explained it from different sides of the viewpoint. And basically, it's a very broad, vague warrant, very broad, vague affidavit for a search warrant. And the judge that signed it, there's some question about that as well. So you have a detective who was not on the raid that filled the affidavit out. 3 other detectives went to this raid to do the search warrant. And there was information that I can't help believe that they may or may not have been privy to or party to, and they had to go make this warrant. There was a lot of debate about it being a no-knock warrant versus a typical knock and announce warrant. Louisville has banned no-knock warrants because of this case, and there's a move to ban them on the federal level and also in the state level from several people that are elected in Kentucky and Frankfort to represent the people. The problem with that, I think, is that if you have a broad ban on no-knock search warrants, they're very dangerous, but they serve a purpose, I think. And the reason that you get a no-knock warrant is if drugs are going to be destroyed, evidence is going to be destroyed, or if you have people inside that are heavily armed that you believe that are a danger, could be a danger to you, could set up a threat if they know the police are coming in. That's the reason you get a no-knock search warrant. So, and it's kind of sketchy as to why you would get a no-knock search warrant for any other reason other than that. I think they tried to get it for whatever reason when they executed the warrant. The Attorney General said this in his news conference. When they tried to get the warrant, it was not a no-knock search warrant. It was a knock and announce warrant. Several statements from both sides, from the people inside the apartment, the person inside the apartment survived, and from the police and from witnesses themselves. The Attorney General cited this witness and this reference in his statement that someone heard numerous times this person say police. At that point, the people inside knew or should have known that it was a police officer. It wasn't Joe Bob trying to come in and rob them. Okay, so whether or not that was really the case or the people inside believe that is something entirely different. The problem is that you had the police come in on a warrant. They had a valid warrant. They were there for a reason. The sketchiness in the background of the warrant is something entirely different. But they were there with a valid warrant signed by a judge, allows them to search. They come in, they announce themselves as police, I believe. and then they were fired on. They fired back. That's the problem, is that they fired back, and 2 officers tried to defend another officer that was wounded. He was shot in his upper thigh, and it hit his femoral artery. Had it not been for officers there that gave him medical aid, namely a tourniquet, he would have died. So, and that injury was from someone inside the apartment. So that's what people are, I guess, are mad about, and I don't know, that's what it comes down to me. We'll wait and see. We've had a few nights of riotous type activities. We've had a state representative that was arrested for rioting. A lot of businesses are boarded up, and this is all in the middle of a pandemic. I'm not really sure if Louisville can recover from this economically or physically. It's a very strange time we're living in this area, but those are the facts. You can take your inferences from that however you want, but those are the facts. That's what happened, and people are upset, I think justifiably so, that no one's going to prison for this young lady's death. But a lot of things have been hidden between the mayor and the family and other people that know what's going on. They're hiding things that are relevant, and you have to ask yourself why that's happening, and no one's doing that. And asking those questions doesn't mean that you're racist. Doesn't mean that you hate black people because you want to know what actually was going on or what happened. I think there's enough evidence to suggest that Breonna Taylor was involved with this enterprise, this drug enterprise that was going on between these 3 or 4 or 5 houses. I guess don't deal drugs. Don't help people that deal drugs. And don't fire at the police. It's pretty simple. If you do those things, then you're going to have a lot better chance of surviving. You can argue about the merits and the legalities of that and the vagueness of that later on in court, but if you're not alive to do that, you can't do that. So that's all I've got time for right now, and I'll see y'all again. Thank you.